With free agency right around the corner, here's 4 guys that have pretty high ceilings, but also have pretty low floors. Let's check them out. Welcome back to Dynasty Nerds YouTube. My name is Garret Price. Today I want to talk about 4 running backs that, because of free agency and because of the draft, have pretty high ceilings, but also pretty low floors, risk reward, whatever you want to call it. But these guys could find themselves in big prominent roles, and they're not crazy expensive, but they're not cheap or free either. And the floor on these guys is pretty low as well. And so really what this comes down to is your risk tolerance. How much are you willing to risk on running backs? But for me, in a running back class that there's some really solid players, but not too many guys that are going to completely take over a backfield, I think that there's a good shot that these guys still have some good relevancy in 2024. Let's talk about 2 players first that are not part of the free agent class, but really fall into this mold. The first one for me, Ty Chandler. So Ty Chandler's coach came out and basically said that right now they really like what they have in him. He spoke very glowingly about Ty Chandler. But Ty Chandler doesn't have the best draft capital. But last year, what did he have? 6 games where he had 12 touches or more. In those games, he averaged 13 points per game. And in the one game where he was truly the featured back, 24.7 points. So he played really well for the Vikings. And right now, they have other holes, other needs. I don't anticipate them spending big in free agency or big in draft capital getting a running back. So Ty Chandler is a guy that could be fairly cheap, that, yes, the bottom could fall out and he's not the starter anymore. But I think odds are pretty decent that he's going to be a factor for the Vikings in 2024, which means he's going to be a factor for your fantasy football team in 2024. The next guy on this list is Zamir White. We've been talking about Zamir White for a long time at Dynasty Nerds. And man, it looked like it was not going to come together for Zamir. And then all of a sudden, the last 4 games of the season, he gets this opportunity to be the featured back. And it really took the bull by the horns there. He averaged 15 points per game over his last 4 games. And that was with the absence of Josh Jacobs. And what really helps is, even though there's a coaching change, there's not for him. It's Antonio Pierce came in partway through the year, and Antonio Pierce is going to lead this team for the 2024 season. So he got an opportunity to really show the Raiders what he could do. And for a team that has a lot of other holes, specifically on the defensive side of the football, it's another one where I don't anticipate them spending big in free agency or spending a lot of draft capital on a running back. So he's a guy that, even though all of a sudden he might not have the opportunity to be a starter anymore, I think the reward does slightly outweigh the risk. Next 2 guys we're going to talk about here are guys that are in the free agency class. And the first one here is Tony Pollard. Now, if you had Tony Pollard last year, I know you were disappointed. But it's not like his season was that bad. He was running back 14 overall on the season. And yes, you were hoping for a little bit more now that he got the featured role, because he was running back 8 the season before. But here's the thing. It sounds like the Cowboys want him back. And if they thought he did that poorly, I'd be confused why they'd want to bring him back in free agency. But let's also remember, he's almost better when he's not getting a ridiculous amount of touches. Now, I know that sounds weird. Running backs are always better with more touches, but he plays better in that change of pace, a guy that's a little bit more of a bruiser. So whether he gets the full workload, cool. If he doesn't get the full workload, cool. I think either way, his price, because of the perceived down year last year, I think the price is fairly inexpensive. And yes, he could end up being nothing this coming year. But another one where it's a risk reward, but I like the risk here because I think the reward is worth it. Last but not least, Austin Ekeler, former running back 1 overall, many top 5 finishes in his career. And it does look like he's about at the end. He's a little long in the tooth. He's probably not going to be a Charger again this coming season. But he is a guy I want to keep an eye on. Another one that he's still expensive enough that I'm a little nervous about him. But depending on the owner, if I'm a contender, he's a guy that I'll put a flyer in on just because we know that he can do it. We know that in the right system, in the right offense, he can catch enough passes and make it happen. I'm really curious as to where he's going to end up in free agency, but in the right spot, he could be really, really beneficial for your team. The hard part is you're going to have to gamble on that now, because if you wait and he signs with a big-time team where he's going to have an awesome role, well, now he's too expensive. So you're going to have to gamble a little bit now, but he's one of those guys that, will the risk be worth the reward? It could go either way on Ekeler, but it's worth a shot with how cheap he's probably going to be compared to the other guys that could put up some monster seasons.